To notify the user that they're offline and potentially disable certain features, we need to detect the status of their network connection. To do that, we use the NetInfo API in Expo. This API is built by React Native community and is fully supported in Expo. So let's go ahead and add this to our project. All right, now back to app.js. I've cleaned up the code here so we can focus on this demo. So on the top, let's import NetInfo from React Native community / NetInfo. Now, this object has a bunch of methods. We have the fetch method to get information about the network connection. So we call it, we get a promise. Now we can await that promise or call then to get a NetInfo object, and then we can log it on the console. Take a look. Here's what we get. This object has a bunch of properties. We have details, which gives us more information about the network connection. Here we have IP address, is connection expensive, SSID, and subnet mask. We also have is connected, which tells us if we have a network connection. But we have another property called is internet reachable. A lot of people don't know about this property. They just rely on is connected. But here's the catch. Just because there is a network connection available, it doesn't mean that internet is accessible. So you should always check this property. Now currently this property is set to null because NetInfo is trying to figure out if internet is reachable. The way it does this is by pinging a remote server. I think it's Google, but you can always configure this by using NetInfo. So it pings a remote server, waits for a response, and during this time, this property is null. So with the fetch method, we can get information about the network connection only once, and this is not very reliable. So quite often we use another method called add-event-listener. With this, we can subscribe to network status changes. So here we pass a function. This function gets called every time there is a change in the network status. So let's say NetInfo goes to console.log NetInfo. Now take a look. We have two objects here. Initially, is internet reachable is null, and then it became true. Now this method returns a function for unsubscribing, unsubscribe. So typically we call this method in component didMount in class components, and then we call unsubscribe in component will unmount. It's really important to unsubscribe. If you don't unsubscribe, your component will keep querying NetInfo API and you're going to end up with memory leaks. So this is how we can use NetInfo in class components. Now in this course, we use function components. So we have a special hook that hides all this complexity. So let's import use NetInfo hook. Now let's call it over here. We get a NetInfo object. All that subscribing and unsubscribing happens under the hood inside this hook. So here we have a NetInfo object. With this, we can show an offline notice to the user or disable certain features. For example, we can check NetInfo that is internet reachable. If it's true, we're going to render this view. Otherwise, we're going to render a different view. That's one idea. Or we might have a button. So we set the disabled prop to not NetInfo is internet reachable. So if there is no internet connection, then we're going to disable that button. These are a couple of ideas we can play with. Next, we're going to talk about caching.